right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new podcast brought to you by the Phoenix Friends of Jung. I am your host, Kara, and today we are going to be discussing one of our recordings on our website. This is titled Jung's Concept of the Self and is presented by the eminent late scholar Lionel Corbet. Lionel Corbet passed away about a year ago, around this time, actually. And he was a distinguished psychiatrist, scholar, professor at Pacifica Graduate Institute, and author. And he is just an expert in the subject of the self and the religious function of the psyche. So if this subject really interests you, go to our recordings and have a look and listen. The point of these podcasts that we're doing is to bring just awareness to like all of our amazing recordings by experts and authors in Jungian psychology. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and if you want to know more, I'll link the recording to this video, and I hope you enjoy this discussion. All right. So I'm going to start here with a couple introductions. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Kara. I am part of the Phoenix Friends of Jung, a board member. Jungian psychology is really a deep intellectual passion of mine and also a personal passion. It kind of like paved the way in my own life for transformation and growth, and just means a lot to me. So I'm really excited to be talking about anything related to Jungian psychology. So I will leave it at there, and I will introduce my discussion partners today. Brian, who's also a member of the Phoenix Friends of Jung. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Think of myself more just as a average man. Stumbled into Friends of Jung on Meetup and just kind of been enthusiastically learning more about the about the subject and what he's got to offer. That's it.
All right. How about you, Elliot?
Yes, hi, I'm Elliot. I'm on the board as well. Um, and, for me, I started getting into Carl Jung. I took a book off my mom's bookshelf, and then that turned into being a member of the Oregon Friends of Carl Jung when I was in grad school. And that turned into me getting on the board of the Phoenix Friends of Carl Jung. And, right there, we're talking about 19 years. So I'm excited to talk and help be part of this nonprofit, which is the whole point of it is to share Jung and get people to talk and think about it.
Nice. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Brian. So today, like I said earlier, we're going to be discussing Dr. Lionel Corbet's presentation of the notion of the self. So I'm gonna kind of start by, what did Carl Jung mean by the self with a capital S? So the self with a capital S is, as Jung defines it, is the archetype of wholeness, and it's also represents the totality of the psyche. So it kind of sits at the center and is regulating and kind of it kind of creates this unifying nature of the psyche. So it's leading us towards growth and wholeness and attracting us to what makes us whole. Which is another way, which is very important because Jungian psychology is all about individuation, and that's about becoming who you really are meant to be. It's like this guide within, and it's beckoning us towards to really embrace the natural course of our own becoming, kind of like a blueprint of our unfolding, right? Kind of like an acorn that becomes a tree. The acorn already has the pattern within it to become the tree. Um, so it's just a fascinating topic. In Corbet's presentation, he talks about how the self is also overlaps with images of the divine, and it speaks in symbols. Um, and I just think that's really fascinating. So it's kind of this like God within. So I'll start with that, and I'm gonna send it over to you guys, Elliot or Brian. Do you guys have anything to add about like what do you guys think about when you think of the notion of the self?
I guess for me, I mean, just this is newer concepts for me. But when it comes, I mean, the God within really is, I think, this the central thing that really that stuck out for me and felt like, um, I don't know, like like the truth, I guess, and the part that, um, I don't know, I guess the part that is kind of latched onto. It was like, okay, yeah, that feels right. That kind of that inner divine, and just kind of having that, I don't know, thinking about that just being within, the power within all of us, and yeah, that's I guess that's what I got on that, Elliot.
Yeah, I mean the capital S self is like, um, I mean in practice it's kind of like an ideal, but in theory it's can be described in like I would say dozens of ways pretty easily. You know, like the limitless potential for wholeness, right? The theoretical integration of the shadow. Um, you know, you could go on and on about, but I think about it as being sort of infinite, and it reminds me of something one of my a qigong teacher told me. He said, you know, there's infinitely more space inside you than outside of you.
Mm,
And that I think about that when I think about the capital S self and other, you know, cliches like you could see the world in a grain of sand and things like that. So
mm.
um, it's that's what the capital S self kind of reminds me of. It's largely an ideal in practice that can't be attained, but also in theory, it's a rich, fertile ground for discussion.
Yeah, for me, yeah, like you said, jumping off what you said, Elliot, is about like discovering like the wholeness and the divine within. Um, and that's just what Jung is really about, right? When we talk about divinity or religion, he's talking about a personal experience with these symbols that have a certain type of charge to create types of like transformation and power within. Um, I think it's so important to for me it's so interesting because this dialectic between like external dogmatic doctrinal religion that we grew up in where like the symbols are dead, they have no psychological um, effect on us, um, because the psyche is kind of this meeting point between symbols and psychology, what this means to us. So like for me, for Jung, it was like you have your own access, your own phenomenological experience of religion. Um, and I don't know, I just, it's hard to,
Yeah, I mean Corbett was saying the same thing, right? In this talk, he's saying that it's basically an innately human thing, right? It's like and so it's like your birthright, you know, and that's to me one of the things that bothers me about the history of organized religion, and the only one I really know about in any detail is Christianity. But it's like the idea that there's going to be some patriarchal, pyramidical structure telling you which symbols you can use for worship, and what they mean. Whereas it's very obvious that in the history of humanity, there's all these other symbols that people were obviously emotionally connected with that obviously led to, we can assume, numinous experiences and experiences of the divine and recognition of the self, and the potential of the self. So it's like our birthright, and it's also something we're just drawn to, like moths to a flame.
Yeah, because I think above all, as human beings, we have this desire to know. Like religions aren't meeting the spiritual needs of the people today. Like we want to know what's really going on behind them, right? Like we want to have a direct experience of it, a certain, what I would say, gnosis, um, because you just know, you experience it. You don't need to believe in it, right? Like I know the religious scholar Jeffrey Kripal compares it to like having an orgasm, right? You don't believe in orgasms, but when you have one, you know what that's like. But it's like impossible to describe what it's like to have an orgasm to people that have never had one.
Mm.
But when you have one, it's
I think
really,
a sneeze is the closest thing, right?
you know what? A
I
sneeze.
mean, I've heard that before, and I kind of agree. A sneeze is the closest thing to it. I mean, I agree with that actually too. If you had to try to explain it to somebody, right?
A sneeze, I've never heard that. I've heard the
Well,
French call it the le petite mort, the little death.
there you go. There's another tough one. Um,
The sneeze.
the well, I mean, I think part of what we're getting at though is the self wants to know the self wants to know the self, and things that are used in that journey is symbols. And I mean, some religions and also culture, like it's like a mix of culture and religion. I mean, like I can imagine that if you just go to church once a week and then you have free reign the rest of the week, I can imagine that the religion is not really limiting your experience of the divine. So I'm not like totally out on the possibility of that, right? Uh, anyways,
Mhm. Yeah, I know I was reading about how like William James was talking about like that would be like secondhand religion, like you're reading a temple and you're reading someone else's experience. Um, so I guess it really depends on your approach to religion. Um, for
and what
me,
about squaring the circle? Do you guys remember him talking about squaring the circle in the recording?
no, no. Can you explain that?
A little bit. I
Um,
mean, I remember a little bit about it.
so it kind of relates to what we're talking about now in the recording. The Lionel Corbett, he was talking about how this idea of squaring the circle, which is basically like interacting with the divine, but in like a intentional way. Now, I don't want to misquote him, but it's like a theme through history. So like this, like maybe the circle is the wholeness, and the squaring is like just something that people do. Like we can't help but try to square circles, kind of thing. But it's not like it. Once again, it's not all negative. It's not like I think a lot of times the anti-institutionalized religion angle is like that's all bad, but it's like more just like if it's to the exclusion of something else, I would say that it's bad, but it's also just like something that people do, I guess. And it reminds me of how like the columns in ancient Greek, like they started out looking like, to me at least, just like a penis, like being crushed by the roof. And then over time, they developed little swirls, and then they developed the Corinthian, which is like the flowers and everything. So it's like an evolution of how the concept, but that concept was the masculine going up and hitting the feminine, right? So it's like we're just inclined to do that kind of stuff, I guess. And that's part of the process too, I think, is it's an interaction.
Mm.
Yeah. I took a little different take from the squaring the circle from, at least, how I listen to it. Um, if I could be mistaken, but I thought he was talking about kind of the sacred geometries of things. And again, I don't want to misquote because I don't have it in front of me, but like I thought it was like, at least how I remember, circles and spheres were almost divine, where squares were more earthly and kind of bodily and stable. And
Yeah.
how I took the squaring of the circle, it's almost like trying to take the divine and make it almost in the image of the earthly, right? Or of the body, and kind of that process that I think that we do, which kind of ties in, I think, also how, well, if we go back to the self question as well, just kind of how we see, God in kind of our own, not our own image, but like we maybe reference our parents in a way, or to our vision. So it's like we're taking our, I don't know, our experiences here within our body and our earth, and we're trying to make the divine fit within it. And
Mm,
that's kind of how I took
wow.
that. But
Yeah, it's some sort of interaction between the divine and the earthly, for sure. And I think it's a nice little teaser for the recording to say that,
yeah, I gotta watch it.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like, it's a very nuanced concept that Lionel Corbett, expert, talks about.
That's right. All
So,
right.
what were you saying about numinous experiences?
Yeah, so I guess one thing that I I'll bring my own little personal nuance to this, just because it always, I find this super fascinating when I was hearing, Dr. Corbett talk about it, and when I hear Jung talk about it, it's like there's often, through dreaming and imagery, is like a really important part of these numinous experiences, um, for the people that are having them. Um, One thing, and this is where I would love to talk to an expert, but this always brings this comes up for me. I recently found out I have aphantasia, which pretty much means I can't conjure images in my mind's eye.
Mm.
So when I learned about that, I really started realizing how I actually process the world around me in relation to imagery and images, and how that shows up in just basically in my mind. Um, and I have always had a hard time relating. Like I do have dreams, but it doesn't ever seem to match up how it's described in these writings or these presentations. But I do feel like I match, like on an inner experiential, like, kind of level. So like I maybe not through the imagery or the visions, but um, I may enter a place and I'll feel something in my body in a sense, right? And I think, at least for me, I've noticed as of late, like that's actually a lot of my processing happens in non non-visual. Like I can see, but it's like the imagery isn't the part. It's more almost experiential in how I sense and feel within my body. Um, I don't know if that's considered numinous or not, but how
So
they
wait,
describe the feeling behind it kind of feels like a match.
are you, what are your dreams like?
Um, Typically, it's reality turned up to 11. So, like, things are very crisp, clear, colors are brighter, emotions are more intense. I'm a character, but I also am observing it. So, it's like almost like I'm watching my own dream on TV, would be a good way to describe how I dream. Um,
Is it like being John Malkovich kind of the movie?
I haven't seen it, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, you seem to be. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding. You're saying that you don't have like imagery isn't the main thing, so because you use the word reality there too. So it's like it's not like there's a purple unicorn walking through. You're saying it's mostly reality stuff. Okay.
Well, like real boring. It's it's like there's not a supernatural element or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's like just everyday.
Uh,
I
yeah.
don't want to say boring because it's not
Yeah.
like it's boring, but
The imagery is
it's
boring. The imagery is true to
sure
life usually. Okay.
mundane. We'll say mundane,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I understood. That's interesting. And you're saying that you think the feeling you have, whether it be a dream or whatever, is still the feeling matches up with the numinous description to some degree.
Right. But I don't feel that feeling, at least how I'm understanding their description of it, is often tied to dreamlike states. My experience is I have not that same feeling is more when I'm in and of the world and I feel like that within my body instead
Yeah, I see
of
what you mean. It's like
yeah,
there's nothing outward, there's nothing on the outside that's triggering the feeling. Is that what you mean? It's
there
more like
might
your
be
relationship to the world
kind
around you.
of yeah, it could be right. So like I mean, it could be where and this is it's happened going to a really cool old church, right? There is imagery there, but it's not really imagery in my own mind, but it can bring up a feeling within often in nature, right? Like I get that feeling. um but for me it's like the distinction of like from the perspective of Jung and Corbett, I don't know enough, so it's like, is that a numinous experience? Like
Yeah, it's an interesting
it's
question
hard for
though.
me to define.
Yeah, the degree, like the what is the
Yeah,
degree of, let's say, awe
Mm.
or novelty, or how tremendous does the experience have to be, and how much different than your normal experience does it have to be? It's like a question of degree. But I would think that Corbett would say it's like you know it when you see it kind of thing, and he
yeah,
thinks it does have to be awe-inspiring, and you'd have to remember it too. So it'd have to be enough different that you'd remember it and stand out, I
yeah.
think.
And there's awe. I mean, yeah, there's awe. Yeah, I would agree. And there's times where I do feel awe within the experience,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel, and maybe it's working in the background. It doesn't feel related to imagery in the sense of how the examples that were given in the presentation and some of you know the few things that I've kind of read or been exposed to on the subject.
Yeah, to me, I would say it would be like a image coupled with a very strong emotion that you're having this experience of experiencing something other, like
Yeah,
like beyond consensus reality, something
right.
that takes you out um, of reality. So yeah, one I think the degree matters, and I think that's what Corbett kind of highlights is like it's really that emotional experience um, that is the gradient to judge it. So with that said, like Brian, have you ever had a numinous experience?
I think I think so. Like I don't know. I'm trying to define it within myself, right? If what I feel would fall under this, would and I don't remember how it tied in, but would the use of psychedelics be a pathway to a numinous experience? Um, if yes, then yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it could, but I think it has to transcend whatever that is,
Mm,
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely could. I'm guessing everyone who does psychedelics thinks they're going to really remember their first trip. But if they do it additional 10 times, like some people, they probably at the end are like, you know what, I don't actually remember that first time that much. In which case, that'd probably be a good sign it wasn't a numinous experience, you know. But I don't know. It's a tough one. I can't even think of a numinous experience personally. Um, Meditative experiences I've had, but not this, what I would put right in squarely in the numinous category. So, what about you, Kara?
Yeah, I've going back to um like psychedelics, there are those trips that you have that kind of you remember, they have this quality of just kind of experiencing like the mystery of the universe or the totality of the universe. Um, like for example, I took really high dose of LSD and I like dissolved into the earth and became like part of the earth, right? Like for me, I couldn't rationalize it. I couldn't really describe it, but it was like that feeling, that tremendous emotional experience of like what that felt like. And it was vivid and it just like changed kind of my worldview and my conception of self and things like this. So for me, that was a qualifier. And I probably can name a couple of those with psychedelics. Um, and, I had another one like, kind of, I had the honor of watching my mother pass to the other realm, and I got to watch her take her last breaths. And I felt, when I was watching it, I felt like time and space just like stopped. And I entered into this feeling, just, I don't know, this feeling of like I was in this other realm and there was something else in the room with us. I just felt it, I can't really explain it or characterize it. It's just a feeling, a very tremendous feeling that I will carry for the rest of my life. So for me, I think I would qualify those as numinous experiences. Um, Kind of, and I would say that that was the self um, expressing itself through me, right, or through reality. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's it's ultimately about actually experiencing something personally, really. That's the main thrust of it, I guess. Uh, in that sense, yeah, I can think of one sticking out for me now, but like getting to actually experience something that really pushes the limits of um, or makes real. I guess it like makes real something that maybe you suspected was true, before on some sort of non-physical plane. Like I remember I went to a group meditation class. So this qigong teacher I had in Portland, Oregon, the same guy I mentioned, he had his normal class like Monday nights, and then he had a drop-in meditation on Thursdays. And I went to it only once, and the one time I went there, it just so happened nobody else went, so it was just me and him. And we're just sitting in two chairs about 10 feet apart, and we just start doing these meditation stuff, and then we start like just sort of like closing our eyes and just sitting there, like I said, 10 feet apart and meditating in a certain way. And all of a sudden, I just caught in this like river of energy, and I could clearly sense he was like an eddy, and then the energy was going up, and then through him, and then out, and I was an eddy, and then there was energy that was going through both of us, and it was all mixing together, and it was very clear, and I was like just perceiving it like very clearly. And his eddy of energy was way bigger than mine, like, 4 times as big or something like that. And then he just like stops meditation. He's like, any questions? And I just like looking at him, just like, nope. And I really meant it because I really did not have any questions. I was like, I pretty much got what I needed there.
Yeah. Well, that makes me wonder too. And again, this goes, I mean, the experience that kind of changes worldview, I guess, if we'll kind of anchor to that and the experience. For me, one of them was I my buddy and I went on a road trip and we stopped at this hostel, and there was the woman who ran it and then this lady who just kind of stayed there, and she offered massages, and I was like, oh, I'll try that. I was 20, 21, and I'd never had a massage, but we'd been sleeping in the car for weeks. So I was like, this might be a good thing, right? I mean, we're essentially sleeping in a Toyota Corolla, the two of us, and very rarely would stay in a bed. So I was like, this could feel, just a good experience. So I'm like, all right, I will sign up for this and I'll try it out the next day. So I talked to the lady the next day, and she's like, well, just so you know, this is a touchless massage. I'm like, what? I've never heard of this. All right. But I was like, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'm giving it a go. So sign up. We, had a little discussion. We do the thing. I'm laying down. I don't know. And she's like, just close your eyes and just relax and kind of go with it. And so, about 10, 15 minutes in, I could sense kind of she's doing thing. It would be similar to Reiki, I'm assuming, just some type of energy type of work. And her hands went over approximately, my breastbone, and I could feel, and she wasn't touching me. The closest thing would be like when you have two magnets, they either snap together or they repel. I could feel the force of what felt like that repelling magnet force coupled with pretty intense heat. So like this building heat was building up in my chest. I could feel this pressure and force pushing down on me. And honestly, it blew my mind in a weird way because I was like, I wasn't expecting anything going in. I have this thing, and it really kind of changed my mind or my worldview on kind of the wonders of the unknown, which I really had no really experience with. But it's like, okay, this experience, I don't know. It's like it kind of moved the veil a little bit for me. So I was like, yes, there is. I don't know what it is. I still couldn't tell you. I know I felt it. I know it was, it was real and it wasn't imagined because I would have never imagined that. Like that wasn't something that felt in my realm, but it brought up the awe. I was a little bit afraid, as there was all of these big feelings that came with it. And it took me, a few days to process through it afterwards. And it still impacts me today and kind of how I process through the world. So I guess I would consider that as a numinous experience for me.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of like the I don't know if Dr. Corbett talked about this in the presentation, but are you guys familiar with like the ego self access? Like,
Mm-mm.
okay. So like basically, the self is the centering, regulating force of the psyche, right? If you look at the Jung's map of the psyche, it's kind of in the middle. And so the self basically like the totality of the psyche, right? So it's taking everything in, like it's taking everything in and like homogenizing it. Like it doesn't care about light, dark, bad, good. It takes everything in. Now the ego is the part of ourself that tries to parse everything out, to try to, create little disparate kind of perceptions of reality. And a lot of us, whether through enculturation or what you name it, we're basically a lot of us are operating unconsciously just through this ego self. So there's this tension of opposites from what I just said, of the ego self access. So, the ego wants to know what's known, it wants to control, it wants safety, it wants comfort. And the greater self doesn't care. It's the totality, right? It's wholeness. And so for me, like, I feel like that is the spiritual path, right? Is unifying that tension of opposites. And I think that's like the religious function of the psyche, why either we have numinous experiences to take us out of that ego standpoint, or we have these dreams, right? Dreams and the psyche are always compensatory, sorry, of what we're experiencing in conscious life. So the ego and self need to be related to one another. It becomes a neurosis if the ego thinks it's in charge, for example. So anyway, it's fascinating to me, like when this kind of these parts, or maybe so with numinous experiences, like you can kind of read research about like people who are kind of like on the threshes of transformation, or maybe they're going through a crisis and stuff. And like for me, when I lost my mother, for example, or psychedelic experiences, they're kind of dampening that ego, right? Or the default mode network, like when you study psychedelics. And I just think that's really fascinating to me. So anyway, I forgot where I was going with that, but
Yeah.
That kind of brought up for me a little bit of, I'm trying to think. I took a few notes, but I'm trying to find the wording. But it was the talk between kind of what is it, the dualistic nature of some of the religions versus,
Yeah,
the more
non-dual.
Eastern word is the non-dual. I mean, essentially, I mean that tension you were talking about, kind of, that's what very much reminded me of that. Um, I mean, just in different words, but it I don't know. That's what kind of brought it up for me.
Yeah, and that rings true to me too, because it's like the Tao Te Ching, but also related to what Kara was saying is it it makes you think, okay, what's the point of the ego? But like as we all probably know at this point, the ego serves as function, and if there was someone who just let everything in all the time, that person probably would not function very well, right? So I mean, the ego does serve a purpose for human beings as far as we know and as far as we've seen, and then there's the compensatory aspect of dreams and the higher purpose of the self and things like that. It's kind of like the itsy bitsy spider, and he went up the water spout, but let's imagine it's like an Arizona spider, and then down came the rain, which he had never seen before, and washed the spider out, but the spider's actually okay, was probably scared. Then out came the sunshine, dried up all the rain, and then the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ego is, you know, maybe the itsy bitsy spider, and then the rain and the sun is like the self, or slash the absolute reality. Um,
The numinous experience. I mean, getting really wet and then the sun coming out and getting dry and kind of realizing everything is okay is kind of like one of those nature experiences that definitely borders on the numinous, I would think.
Definitely.
mhm.
Well, this little different subject, but it's one thing I wanted to plug about the presentation because it was one of my favorite parts, and really honestly I've been just kind of thinking about it just since I've been listening. It's when he kind of talked about the dark side of the self, and he talked about the example of Job. And for me, the part that really just stuck out the most, and really, I don't know, I just never thought about it before, so it was really cool. It's when he talked about if the view is, insisting that God is strictly good, then that forces humanity to essentially be the soul, the scapegoat for all the evil and darkness in the universe.
Mm.
And it was like, holy crap, that's really, for me, I was like, this is a very new way of looking at it, but it made a lot of sense. It's like, yep, that's I guess really pulled out a lot of the kind of underlying issues I never knew I had about the view of a pure, only good, God, if you will. And yeah, and then how he tied in the story of Job, how um, through Job's actions, you know, God or whatever was able to kind of recognize its own darkness. And I don't know, that part alone, I'd say watch the present or listen to the presentation. It's very compelling, and I did not even come close to doing it justice, but it was one of my really awesome part of the presentation.
Yeah, and he has another presentation that's more about Job primarily that we also have. So yeah, it's cool. Yeah, the idea that the God also has a dark side, and uh, and then the idea that like even these terrible narcissist politicians and stuff are somehow possibly doing God's work. And I think that's kind of a just a throwaway comment to make us realize that, we kind of need to just look inward too.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's a great presentation, and yeah, he has more than one that we have as well.
Yeah, for me, like the compelling question is like, and this is what Corbet, you know, investigates. It's like, is there an archetypal evil, or is it a result of like the shortcomings of human behavior? It's like the devil or evil, a projection of intrapsychic material. But, you know, for me, that's like the question of like the chicken or the egg, right? It's like I don't know. It kind of it makes me connect to the thing about like for me, I was really stuck on like is the psyche a conduit or a producer of religious imagery, right? It's like I think it's both.
Yeah.
And but anyway, like what do you guys think? You think it's kind of like archetypal and like an intrinsic part of creation? Like for me, I'm gonna say I think it's both. I think, evil is caused by like, these like shadow complexes of people that haven't done their inner work and things like this. But I also think there's like this archetypal evil. Because like I've experienced, for example, that type of material in psychedelic sessions, the dark and the light and the paradox.
Mm.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's tough because we're also putting evil into this human box as far as like people being evil, which I think is really a slippery slope. Um, and like, I think people can be like really far gone, and then for all intents and purposes, they are evil. But there's also like evil forces, like part of capitalism and how it expresses itself and stuff. And it's definitely, I do believe it's the job of human beings to fight against those kind of things, both the people and the forces. But yeah, I think archetypal is too small of a word for evil because it's really just shadow, like you said too. So it's like it's God's shadow, it's humanity's shadow, it's the individual shadow, which is, well, I guess that's an archetype, right? But it's a pretty big one. Guess that's where I fall on it.
It,
Yeah, I guess I hadn't reflected on that prior to that question, but hearing you two speak on it, I mean, part of what's coming to me is just it feels like it's just part of the whole, right? Like, and that's it. It's like there's the I don't want to say the good and the evil, but yeah, I mean, when you take just the whole of everything, evil is part of it, you know. And yeah, I mean, but that'd be kind of the shadow and individuation and kind of take it to that on an individual level, but I think at a larger universal level as well. I think it's just um yeah, just I think it's part of the just the experience of of existence.
mhm. It's like I have a this quote always kind of is powerful for me, and I have it just like always on my desk. It's by Huang Tzu. I think it's called Huang Tzu, and it's from his like a fragment of his poem, Great and Small. And he says, consequently, he who wants to have right without wrong, order without disorder, does not understand the principles of heaven and earth. He does not know how these things hang together. So yeah, like piggybacking off you, Brian, I think there's this intrinsic part and necessity of evil. Like we can't have good without dark. We can't have light without dark, I mean. And there's everything in the great beyond is just that, just filled with all those paradoxes, and I think that's what I don't know. I personally, my personal belief is that's what we were creating, kind of what you were saying, Elliot, about it's up to humans to we have free choice, to choose between right and wrong. Um, and that's the telos of our existence, personally. But
Yeah, and maybe wisdom is sometimes wisdom expresses itself or it can manifest itself as knowing that there isn't actually an absolute right and wrong, which might give people more, what's the word? Tolerance, but also temperance, with their righteousness, like um, wisdom kind of goes hand in hand with this non-duality. Like, well, one guy really like Robert Monroe, he says, you can't, the world will always be an animalistic, predatory world. And I think the rest of it is something like it was foolish to try to change that. Like that's not something that you could change. Um, and that's kind of the opposite of wisdom, right? Being foolish.
right, that's nature, right? Like red in tooth and claw.
Yeah.
And it's a spectrum. I mean, it seems like the most narcissistic people will whatever the society is, and however narcissistic, let's just say is a word, it's an overused word, but however much that the most that person is will always be the person who's going to be the most predatory person in any society, right? If you're talking in generalities, so it's like you can't stop that, um, but that doesn't mean. I guess I guess a lot of people, I think, kind of go nuts with those kind of concepts. The same as like, what? How can bad things happen to good people? If God's all good, then how? They go kind of a little nuts with those kind of concepts, right? Whether it's secular or theist. But I think wisdom is in the understanding of the non-dual um, as well, and like kind of not putting all your eggs in the duality basket, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, it just makes me think about too, like how Jungian work is really about like rectifying the, the instinctual and the collective parts of humanity, like within your own self. Um, and I just think that's so important because it's, to me, like the more you're able to accept the darkness within your own self, like the least narcissistic you are, the least you project onto everyone else or the world, right? Like, because we all are experiencing the same kind of reality if you really zoom out. So anyway, I just think,
Yeah, and that just made me think of the word magnification, you know, and like resonance and those words like that. Like if you're just filled with rage because someone else does something wrong, I mean, that you think is wrong, I mean, that cannot possibly, at least in my current perception, be helping the situation, right? I mean, like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like a magnification kind of thing. It obviously it's not the person's fault who is mad, extremely mad, but there's a degree there. It's like, I feel like saying, like, is this the first wrong thing you've ever seen in your whole life? Like, come on.
yeah, and that makes me think about how like how we, whether you're like Christian or not, like we inherit kind of the Christian worldview, like this dualistic, like God is all good, like omnipresent, omnipotent, to light, it's like um that kind of becomes our psychology, I think. And to me, it's like this, and the ego's kind of like tyranny of like everything has to be light and positive and happy and because and if it's not, it's wrong, or something like that. So yeah.
The ego is very good at disqualifying things that don't conveniently fit into whatever temporary narrative or like ego trip it's on, right? Um, and even if you can confront the ego with like a direct contradiction, like, oh, well, last year you were saying this about this. Isn't that pretty much the same situation as now, except you were on the other side of it? The ego doesn't care.
Yeah. um the teacher, James Hollis, he says the ego is the petty tyrant. It's funny, but true.
Yeah.
um
I think we might know who the ego of our country is right now.
yeah, there's a lot of ego there. Woof. Sorry, the recording stopped and cut everyone out. Amateur hour around here. Um, if you stayed this long, thank you so much for tuning in. We're learning as we're going, and we're going to create more podcasts for you guys. But yeah, again, if you're interested in these subjects, check out our website, phxjung.org. And I'll link everything at the bottom of this video. So thank you to Elliot, thank you to Brian, members of the Phoenix Friends of Young, and thank you to you for watching this long. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. If feel free to leave comments if it generated any type of discussion. All right, see you next time. Thank you. Bye.